Run with Purpose. This is episode number 110. And for those of you that are new to the show, my name is Flores, and I'm so very glad that you found this podcast. Would love if you would subscribe. As always, you can reach out to me on all the socials everywhere at flores.run. Hope everyone is having a great week so far. Things are good here. Temperatures are starting to warm up. Minnesota's finally getting to a place where it feels like it could possibly be spring here in the next month. Even though we're officially in spring, it's definitely not the case in Minnesota. We're finally getting to some warmer temperatures. I think my run this weekend, I've been able to wear shorts the last few runs, which has been great. I used to have my limit. I think I've talked about this before. My limit of when I could wear shorts and pants used to be 30 degrees. Used to be like, hey, if it's 30 degrees or warmer, not including wind chill, just 30 degrees, I would wear shorts. This past winter, it's just been miserable, and I didn't know when we were ever going to get above 30. And really, with my tights and stuff like that, like they're great, but just my legs cuts off circulation. It's not a fun thing. So it's basically been brought down to, I think, 20. So as long as it's warmer than 20, I'm okay. So this morning I had some 800s I had to run, and I did them in shorts, and it is what it is. Felt good. We're moving on. But yeah, it'll be warm here hopefully soon. Hopefully when we get back from Boston, knock on wood, that everything is on the up and up, and we're finally getting to a little bit more warmer temperatures. Speaking of Boston, that is coming up very soon, just a few weeks away. I am very, very excited for the race, the opportunity. Would I have liked to time qualify for Boston? Yes, I would love that one day, but still having the opportunity to run for Team BMC, the Boston Medical Center. It's just an absolute honor. We talked about it previously with me registering in 2020 and then everything that happened that year. If you're not familiar, there was a few things that happened in 2020, but yeah, I'm very excited to be able to run with the team. And in doing that, I still have some fundraising goals I need to meet. So if it's something that you're able to or willing to do so, you can visit the link in my bio anywhere on social media, or even go to the website, www.flores.run. You can see some Team BMC information there as well, but I'll have a link in the show notes so you can check that out. And then just overall life planning has been going on. Kayla and I have been slowly getting rid of some things, organizing the stuff that we do have. Baby number 5, not my baby number 5, if you're a new listener, is coming to the house literally this week. We don't know when. I think the scheduled C-section is later this week. Probably too many personal details that Dave and Hillary don't want me to share, but oh well, you get it all here and now. So yeah, there's that part of it, the things the house been, and what are we going to do kind of long-term. And it kind of brings into our topic of today. And this topic of uncertainty is something I had actually done before. Someone had brought it up to me saying, hey, why don't you do something on uncertainty with just everything that's going on in your life right now? And I was like, hey, that's a good idea. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've done that before. And went back through the archives, and it was actually episode 30. That I had done it. And it was actually the first episode that was released post shutdown in March of 2020, speaking of 2020. And it was the first episode I had recorded while we were working from home, because I listened back to it and cringed the entire time, just with whether it's audio quality or just my speaking abilities. I think I've actually grown a little bit in 80 episodes, which has been nice to know. Holy crap, that has been 80 episodes ago. That's crazy. Anyways, but yeah, having this idea of, we were sitting in uncertain times, right? We had no idea what was going on. It was our first day there. I was talking about my setup at the desk, how I was going to be working, what it all felt like being like full-time remote, not knowing how long this would last, right? Like we heard from a lot of the politicians and that sort of thing, hey, it'd just be a few weeks, flatten the curve. Remember that thing, flattening the curve, and we'd be able to go back, and then it just never happened that way. And I had this episode really just to give my thoughts on the matter of just what does it really feel like? How do you really handle those uncertain situations, and where do you go with those? And I think, as it affected the whole world, obviously, I think this time of this episode is really a little bit closer to home when we talk about uncertainty. As I had mentioned previously, we've talked about our move that's coming up this fall. We said we were going to be in Minnesota for 2 years, and then for 2 years we were going to be traveling. We didn't know what that really looked like. But the general idea was I would still be working remote, and Kayla and Bella would be able to have their peace, their sunshine, their relaxation, because we were definitely going somewhere warmer than Minnesota. However, when Bella passed last year, things changed, and we didn't know what that meant for us. We knew that we still were only going to be here for 2 years because of cold as one aspect. But we didn't know what that really meant for us long term. And would Kayla go back to work? What would happen? How would we do this? And so things were just up in the air. Plans change. We make these plans. We have all these great ambitions and things, and they just change. When things in life don't go the way that we want, we can sit in this idea of uncertainty. Right. We think we have everything planned out. We've accounted for every possible situation. And then it seems to just fall apart. And maybe not fall apart where everything comes crumbling, but maybe in an idea of it's not at all what you expected. Or maybe you're down a different path than you thought. And we like to joke around at home of when we have everything planned, that's when God just laughs. And it's like, oh, that's adorable. I'm glad that's what you think the plan is. And based off of our faith, it's like, it's not about our plan. There is a plan for us, and we just have to, step in with it and focus on it. But I think this idea of we can sit in this uncertainty when things don't go our way. And it really comes down to this idea of control, right? When we feel this anxiety or stress or what have you around uncertainty, it's because we're unable to control the situation, right? We're uncertain of what this next step is. It's much more comfortable to know where your next step is, and you be able to clearly see that step. And right now we have to think about what are the next steps and what the best choice is for those steps. And we really have endless possibilities in my situation, right? We can go anywhere we want to. We can do a lot of different things, but we're in that almost analysis paralysis, or paralysis of analysis paralysis, however we say it. This idea that we're going to overthink ourselves into a thing because there's so many possibilities, but then it can just feel kind of uncomfy. We're in this uncertain of, we don't know what things are going to happen. We don't know what the world's going to look like even in 6 months of, can we afford to do this, or can we afford to do that? Or do we have to do this? We just don't know. And it's just not fun. Just being completely honest, transparent. It's not a fun place to be. We have faith and we trust, and we know that the things that will happen, or things that should happen, will happen. But it's not fun just to sit not knowing where this next step should be. I think when we come into these types of situations, we can all have a different response. There's a few different ways that we can respond to this. The easiest of which is obviously just give up, right? We know that doesn't help, but that seems like the easiest thing, right? Like if I don't know what's going on, I'm just give it up. It is what it is. And, and just soak in your own pity, if you will, if you want to call it that. We have to do something. Giving up isn't really an option. So where do we go from that moment of, once we realize hey, we can't just give up, where do we go? And I think it has a lot to do with things that I've talked about in recent episodes, in this idea of being present. We need to ground ourselves in what we know to be true right now in the present. Uncertainty a lot of times is really us just worrying about what's going to come. We're not really worried about the right now. It's the planning for the future of what could be in the 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 5 years, 10 years. What does that mean? And when we sit in that uncertainty, that's where it is. It's usually forward focusing and not being in the moment. And it seems like everything is maybe just out of our grasp. And that's where that stress, that anxiety, and those similar types of feelings really start to creep in, because we feel like we're grasping for something and we don't know where it's going to be or where that next step is going to come, right? So I think what we have to do is really buckle down and focus in again on being present in the little things. Taking a look at what's going on and asking yourself, what can I control right now in this situation? What am I able to control? That's where we have to start. We have to start with that reality of the thing we can grasp right now, because that's the step we're currently on. And that step will then help determine the future steps that we can make, right? But we have to start small with where we're right now, because we can get so big in these ideas. If I need to do this, do that. We talked about our aspect of moving, but maybe you're starting a business and you don't know, it's uncertain of where the future holds. Okay, what are you doing right now? Let's just focus it back to right now, to the things that we can control. There is so much in this life that we cannot control. But if we actually sit and focus on the things we can control, that's when we're actually productive. That's when we can actually move the needle forward. Once we realize we have those small steps, the things that we can handle now, we can then see more clearly the steps that are in front of us, the things that we need to do in order to get to that place, right? So often we want to go from 0 to 100, maybe if we want to call it like focusing just on the destination, right? We've talked about this, of being here and just looking. I'm at point A, I'm just looking at point B and not thinking about the things in between. And that's where we get that uncertainty, because we're like, how do I get all the way over there? It's so far. How am I going to do that? And in that moment, that's when we have to take a step back, focus on the first step. We have to take part in the journey, one step at a time, right? Moving forward with it. Not that every step is calculated always or even that comfortable. It's that stepping out in faith sometimes, right? But knowing that it's an actual process and not just a light switch. This idea that I'm going to have to go step by step in order to get that destination. It's not an impulse, just click the switch and all of a sudden I'm at that destination, right? And I think the more we actually grasp and understand that concept, the more we can actually sit in that uncertainty and be okay with that little bit of discomfort. Knowing that things aren't exactly the way that we plan them to be, or the way that we hope to be, or we're just unsure of what that could be. But with that little bit of hope, understanding the journey, we can move forward there. And once we start focusing on what we can actually control, it'll help level us out a little bit. And then at that point, we can start to try to uncover what is actually bringing that feeling of uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is a part of life. As I said, you can't predict every single step. So the more that we can learn about ourselves while we are in those situations, the more we're able to grow through those situations. I'll say that again. The more we're able to learn about ourselves in our situation, the more we're able to grow as we get through it. We can align our focus to make sure that we're staying back on the things that we can control, leaving the things that are just out of our control, people's reactions, things that happen in the world. I'm blanking on other ideas at the moment. Should have probably wrote some of those down. But this idea, we can focus so much on the things that are completely out of our control, that if we can refocus and align our focus back to things that we can actually control, then we can keep taking steps forward. When these attacks come, we can sit and know what is true in those moments because we are focusing on what we can control. I came across this article from Greater Good magazine that talked about different ways to deal or cope with uncertainty. And the intro talks about this idea that we live in a world that attempts to bring certainty in every situation. But they bring up this good point about how uncertainty can actually help us grow and deal with ambiguity. Again, this idea of what can we learn in those uncertain moments to allow us to grow through them. Here's what the article says. It says, but sometimes, maybe always, it's more effective not to attempt to create certainty. Though evolution might have rigged our brains to resist uncertainty, we can never really know what the future will bring. And in improbable situations like the pandemic, which has massively disrupted our routines and utterly destroyed our best laid plans, we need to learn to live with ambiguity. Uncertainty is the only certainty there is, wrote mathematician John Allen Polis. Knowing how to live with insecurity is the only security. I need to see who wrote that quote because it's not a me quote, and I want to make sure I give proper credit where credit's due. It's not loading. Nope, it's loading. Great podcasting, y'all. Nope, same guy. Thought it was a different person. Same person. So again, knowing how to live with insecurity is the only security. I think that hits the point home of we try so hard to fit things in a nice box, right? We try to organize things in such a way that the puzzle always fits, but it doesn't always do that. Sometimes we're missing a piece. And we need to be okay with that and have that little bit of ambiguity to understand that everything just doesn't fit nicely. The last few thoughts that they had in the article, and again, I'll have the article in the show notes so you can read the full article, were a few different mechanisms or things that they have said to how to cope with uncertainty. And these really hit home for me. And the three that I'm going to point out are: don't believe everything you think, stop looking for others to rescue you, and find meaning in the chaos. I think all of these combined are really more about going to that truth aspect, right? Understanding that at face value, a lot of things can look different. But that's why we have to think critically about things and not just believe anything that our mind tells us, right? Going back to the truth. As many times when our mind is doing that, it's really just filling in gaps with our fears and insecurities. When we don't see the clear picture, when there are gaps in those moments in our thought processes, what we're doing is we're filling that with fear and insecurity. And then that can taint the entire thing. If you think about the idea of like food coloring in water, right? This idea of just a small bit of this can change the entire flow of the water, right? The entire color of the water changes just with a little bit of this. And it's the same thing that happens with our fear and insecurities. A little bit just seeps in and it's just enough to throw us off path in these uncertain moments. We have to go back to this idea of holding on to what we can control, what we know to be true. The next thing is about stop looking for others to rescue us, right? We need to stop looking to others to rescue us in the situation, having other folks fix things. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it or seek professional help if we need it, but these specific types of folks, whether it's talking to someone or therapists, what they do is they help us uncover things and see things differently. It helps us see a different perspective of the same situation so we can uncover that ourselves. We should never go into an interaction with someone about uncertainty and expect them just to give us the answers. And then once we have that conversation and once we have those answers, we're going to be all better, right? It's going to solve all of my problems based off of this conversation. That's just setting up poor expectations for you and the other person. And then lastly, we need to use uncertainty to find meaning in the chaos. This can go back to finding the good or the positive in any situation. What can you learn from what you're going through right now? How are you going to grow through this moment, through this situation, through this season of life? If we only focus on the negative thing while we're in the moment, we're going to miss the greater lesson that can come from it when we look back at it. How many times, I know this has happened to me, but how many times has this happened to you where you look back at a tough situation? It felt really tough at the time that you went through. You were in the thick of it, in the middle of it, and it just sucked, for lack of a better phrasing. But then when you actually look back, you laugh about it. You can take inventory about what you learned in that moment and how even though in the thick of it, it felt like the worst possible situation, on this side of it, you know how much better you are because you had to go through it. And I think that is what uncertainty can do for us. It can give us that opportunity, right? Uncertainty is not fun. It can be stressful. It can consume our thoughts and our actions. But just like anything else, if we take a step back and look at the situation from a different angle, a different perspective, we can embrace it. We can separate from the worry and just be in the present, focusing on what we can control. So that's my challenge for you and honestly for me as well in my uncertainty situation. Let's face these uncertain situations in stride. They're not going anywhere. Uncertainty is always going to be around, but how we handle But we can handle it if we handle, I'm sorry, rewind. It's not going anywhere, but we can handle the anxiety if we actually just ground ourselves in what we know to be true. Be present, hold on to the present, be in the moment, knowing that each step is going to lead us where we should be heading. I'm going to close out with another quote from this article, another section from this article that I think just wraps up this uncertainty conversation just completely. And I thought it was just so good. It says, to best cope with uncertainty, we need to stop complaining. When we drop our fixation on the problem, we can focus on the outcomes we desire. How can we make the best of this mess? What can we gain in this situation? When we take responsibility for our lives, we trade the false power of victimhood for the real power that comes from creating the life that we want. Thanks so much for joining me today on this episode. You reach out to me on social media everywhere at flores.run. Subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. We appreciate it. Visit Hangry, wearehangry.com. Get some Hangry gear. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember to keep running with purpose, one step at a time. See you next week.